After the first dungeon crawler game jam in 2021, it was time for a second round, which then took place in April of 2022. Developers had 7 days to put together a dungeon crawler and to send it in. It was up to them how much they wanted to prepare for it and which external resources they wanted to use, as long as the game itself was put together within these 7 days. For the definition of what is considered a dungeon crawler, the rule set of the organizer dungeoncrawlers.org had been used. To summarize it briefly, it has to be some kind of RPG in which you explore from the first-person perspective and move on a grid in a step-by-step manner with 90-degree turns, just like we know it from games like Eye of the Beholder or Wizardry. As a result, more than 50 games have been set in, and in this video I will give you a brief overview of my 12 favorite entries. If that should awaken your interest of checking out any of these games, then you can actually do so, and it's free. You will find a link in the video description to itch.io where you can download them. Alternatively, there's another link to a playlist which contains individual videos where I show each individual game in its full length. To avoid any disappointments, I will also mention whether or not each game can actually be completed. And with that, let's start! We are starting with a crawler called Dumbest Dungeon. The crawler is as silly as the name implies. In randomly generated dungeons, we are beating up humanoid rats in jogging suits wearing some bling bling. Combat is turn-based using play cards, which of course got silly texts as well. Clearing the randomized dungeons, we also get new unlocks like additional cards and also characters, which all come with some cool and funny art. And if you like the humor, the game can be some good entertainment for about an hour, after which you have basically unlocked everything. Unfortunately, there's no proper ending, so it's up to you to decide when it's enough of this silliness. In Aegir Rising, we are waking up in a station at the bottom of the ocean and have to find a way to get out alive. But while we are all alone, we do have a diving suit which comes with its own AI, which appears to have an idea about what to do in that situation. While the combat is extremely simple and we are basically killing enemies by clicking on them, the strengths are clearly in the story and great presentation, turning it into a nice 30-minute long experience until you finish the game. Pretty much the total opposite is Larrikin of Splorr. On the graphical side, the game resembles more of what you would expect on a VIC-20. Well, probably not even that. And while the game mechanics are extremely simple as well, they actually do a great job in making the turn-based combat interesting over the duration of about 30 minutes, which you are going to need to reach the end of the randomized dungeon. Xeno Seekers has quite a cool setting, where we are some apocalypse survivor in a mobile base driving from location to location to get some new resources, stuff we can either use to improve our character or items to sell in order to buy upgrades, which we are going to need. The randomized dungeons are full of different types of enemies which we need to fight in turn-based combat, which works like in a roguelike, where everyone takes their turn once we took ours. Unfortunately, the game does not have a reachable goal and a couple of very nasty bugs. Still, it's worth a look even though you might only play until the first crash. If you are more into puzzles, then there's a jam entry for you as well. Labyrinth is a 3D puzzle crawler which allows you to not just run on the floor, but also on walls and ceilings. So you will need to get a good idea about the 3-dimensional layout of the level in order to hit the right buttons with your bow, which will then open doors or maybe remove the surface below your feet, making you fall into the right direction. It's a pretty cool puzzle game, which took me about 30 minutes to complete. One thing which I think would have improved the game is an option to freely look around, as it can be quite hard to get somewhat of an orientation in these 3-dimensional levels. Wizard Force is a more traditional crawler created in the RPG Maker engine, which I'm always very skeptical towards, as these games often look just the same and spam you with random battles which make any exploration a total annoyance. But in this game it's quite different. The random battles exist, but they are more spaced out. And exploration in this game is actually quite interesting. And I was surprised at how much content it offers, which includes several interestingly designed levels and some story, which also results in a boss fight, which concludes the game with a satisfying ending after about 2 hours. One of the nicest looking entries is Planet of the Beast, which next to its cool looking pixel graphics also has an interesting combat system where enemy projectiles only move if you move yourself, quite similar to what you can find in a game called Superhot. Unfortunately, the game also has a couple of bugs, balancing issues and no real ending. Nevertheless, it's still worth a look to check out the cool art style. Robots and Zombies is another visually pleasing game in which we have to find some data in a space station, obviously guarded by robots and zombies. The game is using a classic real-time combat system which comes with its usual problems, but due to its professional presentation it offers some good entertainment for its 90 minutes until you reach the end of the game. In The Gift of Fire, some animal baddies stole some kind of magical fire, which we want to release to the world so that everyone can have some warmth. Of course, to achieve that goal, we got to kill a whole lot of bunnies and other animals, which is done in a combat system where we need to memorize the order of different letters, and the more we memorize, the more damage we do with our attacks. It's a bit of a change in comparison to the other games, and it works quite well for a gem game like this, which you can actually finish with a proper ending in about 45 minutes. If you like to draw maps, then Deep Dark might be for you. The game is actually rather simple, but you got to draw a map because, especially in the beginning, you won't be able to survive many of the random encounters and should therefore keep running around to a minimum. While the combat is also simple, it's interesting nevertheless as you are dealing with very limited resources, as in limited hit points and weapon durability, and you got to make the best out of it and plan a bit ahead. In total, I spent about 2 hours on the game, including drawing the maps, but I failed at the final boss. Just a little warning here, make sure you are saving enough access till the end if you don't want to suffer the same fate. Nano Ruins is another crawler taking the more classic approach, if you excluded the graphics. We are playing a nano junker in a broken world and we are on a search for some new energy source. Everything in the world got some weird violet color, giving it a gloomy atmosphere. We have to fight some weird cloud-like monsters in a rather standard real-time combat system. We have to gather XP and strengthen our character so that we can make it to the end of the game, which will take about 20 minutes. Overall, a rather well-rounded experience. And as the last entry, I have to mention the highlight of this year's jam. It came from The Forest. That's a crawler which was actually put together by the organizer of the jam himself. The visual style is going into the direction of low-res FMV, which you can also find in games like Betrayal at Kordanor. It is used in this game quite consistently, so that it doesn't look cheap at all, but rather like a conscious art style. The combat is being done in real time, and as you might have guessed, we are mostly fighting against giant ants. The game offers forests, a city with NPCs and quests, multiple dungeons with loot and secret passageways, and you also got some magic in the game. The only thing which would be missing for a full-fledged RPG is a character progression system. But as you will finish the game in just about 2.5 hours, that's not really a big deal. And if you consider the length of most of the other entries, 2.5 hours is actually also rather long in comparison. Of course, the game also got a final boss, which you would need to kill in order to finish the game with a triumphant victory. And with that, It Came from the Forest is a clear recommendation if you're open to giving a jam game any chance. Lastly, I got an extra game I want to mention called Out of the Blue. Technically, it's not an entry to the jam as the developer didn't find enough time to finish the game before the deadline and therefore published the game afterwards. This crawler is a bit of an adventure game as you have to figure out what you do in which order and how to best use the items you find in order to escape this strange blue labyrinth. With 30 minutes of game time, it's a rather short but well-rounded game, which is definitely worth a look and therefore also worth to be mentioned in this video. And with that, we already finished the list of my favorite jam entries. As mentioned before, you can check them out for free on itch.io. If there was anything which piqued your interest, then feel free to leave a comment about that. In any case, I hope that I've been able to give you a good overview and impression of the jam, and if you're interested into dungeon crawlers of this definition in general, then I recommend to visit dungeoncrawlers.org, the organizer of this jam, where you can also find a database of all old school crawlers from 1974 till today. And now I need to get back into the dungeon. I wish you a lot of fun crawling and hope to see you again next time. Bye bye.